Good morning. Today is April 25th, 26th. This is the weekend edition of the New York Times, the international edition. And this is our caricature, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Gantz. Mutual mistrust will wreck the coronavirus emergency government. But an international view, another killer in view. Nairobi, Kenya. Number of people facing acute food shortage could double to 265 million. Pandemic quiets global protest movements. Activists stuck at home wonder when and if they will be able to resume. So it's like, it reminds me of a song I heard when I was a teenager and I went to this cabaret and comedy cabaret, because that's the best way to send a message. And it said, half the world is starving and the other half is vomiting. That's a rough translation from Hebrew, and it's true. Of course, that's very black and white vision, but it's true. Well, there are people starving. There are people I'm so tired of seeing these Hollywood stars in their huge villas laughing away and giggling away, are drinking, sipping alcoholic beverages and thinking they're the center of the universe. This narcissism that we feed, it really is nauseating because they just don't seem to care. It's not just Hollywood. It's like certain people in LA, I'm not going to name, that are just like me, having people take photos of them, handing out food parcels, and hey, you're not the center of the universe, people. Nobody is. In the large slum in Kenya's capital, people desperate to eat set off a stampede during a giveaway of flour and cooking oil, leaving scores injured and 2 people dead. In India, thousands of workers are lingering up twice a day for bread and fried vegetables to keep hunger at bay. And across Colombia, poor households are hanging red clothing and flags from their window and balconies as a sign they are hungry. We don't have any money, and now we need to survive, said Pauline Karoshi, who lost her job at a jewelry business in Nairobi and lives in 2 rooms with her child and 4 other relatives. That means not eating much. And when you don't eat, you're going to get other diseases, because your immune system is just going to go down the drain. So the coronavirus pandemic has brought hunger to millions of people around the world. National lockdowns and social distancing measures are drying up work and income and are likely to disrupt agriculture production and supply routes, leaving millions to worry how they will get enough to eat. The coronavirus has sometimes been called an equalizer because it has sickened both rich and poor. But when it comes to food, the commonality ends. It is poor people, including large segments of poor nations, who are going hungry and facing the prospect of starving. The coronavirus has been anything but a great equalizer, says Asha Jafar, a volunteer who brought food to families in Nairobi slum of Kiberia after a fatal stampede. It has been the great revealer, pulling the curtains back on the class divide and exposing how deeply unequal this country is. And shall I say the world? Already before the crisis, 135 million faced acute food shortage. But now with the pandemic, 130 million more could go hungry in 2020, says Arif Hussein, chief economist at the World Food Program, a United Nations agency. Altogether, an estimated 265 million people could be pushed to the brink of starvation by the year's end. We've never seen anything like this before, Mr. Hussein said. It wasn't a pretty picture to begin with, but this makes it truly unprecedented and uncharted territory. The world has experienced severe hunger crises before, but those were regional and caused by specific factors: extreme weather, economic downturns, wars, or political instability. This hunger crisis, experts say, is global and caused by a multitude of factors linked to the coronavirus pandemic and the ensuing interruption of the economic order. The sudden loss in income for countless millions who were already living hand to mouth. This collapse in oil prices, widespread shortage of hard currency from tourism drying up, overseas workers not having earnings to send home, and continuing problems like climate change, violence, population dislocation, and humanitarian disasters. Already from Honduras to South Africa to India, protests and looting have broken out. Amid frustration over lockdown and worries about hunger, with classes shut down, over 368 million children have lost the nutritious meals and snacks they normally receive in school. There is no shortage of food globally or mass starvation from the pandemic yet, but logistic problems. Let's continue this. Wow. Logistic problems. That means, can't transport. New Delhi. Harvesting and transporting food will leave poor countries exposed in the coming months, especially those that rely on imports, said Johan Swinen, Director General of the International Food Policy Research Institute in Washington. So there's actually research centers that research that. It's terrible. But, I can't do anything. Can't do anything about that, can I? There's an article worth reading. What do I say to a friend who doubts COVID-19? In an astonishing complex conspiracy, it would involve a secret deal between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping and dozens of other political leaders on every habitable continent, people who haven't managed to coordinate their plans on lots of other important matters, like climate change. It would involve doctors in Geneva, at the World Health Organization, Atlanta, at the CDC, and in hospitals all around the world, conspiring with data scientists at Johns Hopkins to produce a fantastic flow of fake information. So this is against the conspiracy theory. So anyway, so I don't know. I do think the hysteria. I think that people don't think for themselves, and I think we should be aware that there's definitely an influence of countries affect each other. So this is the New York Times comics, because I can't be sad, and I know it's a contract. So what does she say? Lucy, all right, I give up. I can't get along with this family. I give up. Where do you go to give up? He says. Okay, so there's Garfield. Dear Ask a Dog, if a squirrel snuck up behind you and said, boo, would you be scared? Okay, it was very visual. The dog has disappeared. Okay, and Calvin and Hobbes I really like. That would be... I think baseball is the most boring game in the world. I've been standing out here in deep left field all this time, and not a single ball has come out here. Actually, I suppose it's just as well. I don't know what base to throw to anyway. In fact, I'm not even sure I can throw that far. Hey, what's everyone doing? Are people switching teams or what? The guys at bat are now out here. Well, I'm sure someone would tell me if I was supposed to be doing anything different. That's how I feel always. What's the point of these games? And last, Wally, I need you to practice social distancing until the virus risk has passed. I already do that. I haven't hugged anyone since the 80s. Good job. High five. Back off. That was good. And if you need a challenge, focus on this. The word jumble for unscramble the words. Wow, I'm really not good at things that need a right answer. The company's new facility for producing granite and marble countertops was. So This is the jumbo for today. I'm not gonna. Wow, and there's the crossword puzzle. I managed to do like 3 words usually, and then I'm really proud of myself. What else? So, hey people, there's some people that live like this. Can you believe it? I don't envy them because to live like this, you have to put in so many hours or you don't work in a, I don't know. There's a price for everything, in other words. How to solve the world's 2.5 trillion problem. Poor countries are going to be decimated by the coronavirus. They need a serious rescue package. You know what? Out of my league. I don't think I'm going to read it, but professors of London School of Economics. I don't know. I really can't even handle my own financial situation, so this is too big for my shoes to get into. Why I couldn't talk during quarantine. Um, what else? What else? What else? Sorry if so select. Um, so this is nice. So they ask always somebody. Today it's Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. The novelist, whose 2006 book Half of the Yellow Sun is being re-released, likes to read poetry while writing as a way of immersing myself in the language of luring back my own words. What is the great book you have read? Isabel Wilkerson's The Warmth of Other Suns. Magisterial can seem a little portentous, but it really is the best word to describe it. And The Joys of Motherhood by Bucci Amacheta. When I recently reread, was struck by its quiet power and accomplishment. Are there any classic novels that you only recently read for the first time? James Salter's Light Years. Can a great book be badly written? What other criteria can overcome bad prose? I think of this quote from Leopold Sédar Senghor. I've always taken care to put an idea or emotion behind my words. I have made it a habit to be suspicious of the mere music of words. Wow, that's a nice one. A great book can be badly written if its content is of such power that the bad writing pales in comparison. Many accounts of pre-colonial Africa are not necessarily paragons of style, but their greatness is in the importance of what they document. I like the music of words, but I like more so the meaning of words. Wow, that's deep. Describe your ideal reading experience. I love to read in bed, curled up and comfortable, usually early in the morning or late at night, with quiet in the air, my iPad, or a book propped on a pillow. What do you read when you're working on a book? I mostly read poetry. Oh, that's cool. I love the opulent poetry of Tisani Doshi. And the more formal work of Derek Walcott and Christian Wiman. I am presently dipping in and out of poetry by Terence Hayes, Major Jackson, and Mary Oliver. Oh, Mary Oliver is great. I try not to read novels that are similar to whatever I'm working on, but I reread novels I love, like Chinua Achebe's Arrow of God, to remind myself what fiction can do. Americana. I read that. What other book would most likely to see turned into a movie? Oh, it's going to be turned into an HBO adaptation. I'd like to see Lola Shinoyam's The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives. Okay. Do you count any books as guilty pleasures? No, because the premise of books as guilty pleasure is that one should not enjoy some books that one does. This idea rooted in the cult of literacy snobbery. For me, books are divided into books that interest me and books that do not. That's true. I own all pleasures. What's the most interesting thing you've learned from a book recently? I've read a bit of African American history, but White Rage by Carol Anderson, which is beautifully written, exhaustively researched, illuminated for me just how deliberately education policy in the United States disenfranchised African Americans. How do you organize your books? I don't, but I very much like to. What book might people be surprised to find on their shelves? A book about Christianity. The Bible tells me so. Why Defending Scriptures Has Made Us Unable to Read It by Peter Enns. Pentecostal Christianity is such a potent force on the African continent, and I'm very interested in understanding its dynamics. Who is your favorite fictional hero or heroine? Complexity, Contradiction of the Narrator in Elizabeth Hardwick's Sleepless Nights, a book I adore. So much to read, God. As far as villains go, I think Shakespeare's Lady Macbeth. How have your reading tastes changed over time? Growing up in Nigeria, I loved reading crime novels. The novels of James Headley Chase. Titles like Want to Stay Alive, A Hole in the Head were favorites. Now I find myself largely uninterested in traditional crime novels. I prefer to enjoy my crime on screen. When I was younger, I didn't have patience for what I considered slow novels, but now I relish novels, the mind, the psychology of their characters. Who would you invite, dead or alive, literary party? Ama Ato Aidu, I don't know these. Mary McCarthy and Buzu Michinera. Wow, so much we need to catch up, people. So, I'll leave you with this image. Modern Love by Sarah Rosen. My boyfriend broke up with me the week before they found my neighbor. The breakup happened in the evening. I had spent the day grocery shopping because the World Health Organization had just declared a pandemic. Determined to remain optimistic, I was making chicken soup and blasting Motown when my boyfriend walked in looking pale and pained. I took one look at him and knew either he had a tragic update about coronavirus or our relationship was about to end. It takes a particular kind of crisis to make your boyfriend breaking up with you the better news. As we hugged goodbye, he said through tears, "There's a social distancing joke in here somewhere." The breakup surprised me, not only because the timing was horrific, but because I thought we still had a relationship to salvage. We had been together for 6 months and were good to each other, though we moved through the world in very different ways. I was tempted to chalk it up to the pandemic and hope he would change his mind. I drank 2 shots of whiskey and woke up with stomach pains and diarrhea. 2 days later, my symptoms persisted. I didn't know if it was the bug, coronavirus, or the physical manifestation of emotional turmoil. The symptoms got worse. I thought I had a fever, but my thermometer was broken, so I slid a meat thermometer under my tongue, which seemed inaccurate and had a pointy tip that hurt. I thought longingly of my now ex-boyfriend in his apartment a mile away. After a breakup, I usually try to reassert my independence and surround myself with friends, but now that was impossible. I worried that asking my ex for help so soon would seem needy, but I was too sick to care, so I texted him. When he showed up on my doorstep with Tylenol, Gatorade, Imodium, and Pedialyte, I felt overwhelming gratitude. Was it a promising sign, or was he just being a mensch? The pandemic had wiped away the normal rules of a breakup, and we were in a murky new territory. A few days later, I heard noises in my hallway and opened my door to find 2 emergency medical technicians knocking on the door of the apartment next to mine and trying the handle. "When did you last see your neighbor?" one asked. "I don't know," I said. "His son called because he hasn't heard from him in a few days," she said. My neighbor was a man in his 80s who lived alone and used to put a chair out on our building's narrow terrace in the summertime when he would sit and read. When the firefighters arrived, they went through my apartment to gain access to my neighbors through the fire escape. I opened the windows and doors for them so they wouldn't have to touch anything, then returned to the hallway and heard them report over the radio that he was dead. My across the hall neighbors and I exchanged a glance of shock and shared responsibility. When the firefighters emerged, I asked how long ago my neighbor had died. They said they wouldn't know until the medical examiner arrived. I had a sinking feeling by touching the building's doorknob a week earlier that I passed on a virus that I didn't even know I was carrying. Overwhelmed by this bleak reality, I became consumed by a kind of panicked mania and began baking banana bread as my neighbors and I waited for the medical examiner. He arrived when the bread was in the oven, a cheerful man who told us the body had already begun to decompose. So it has been more than 2 days. He showed my neighbors a photo of the body on his digital camera so they could identify him, then said, "Wow, something smells good. Are you making cinnamon rolls?" My neighbor dying alone in his apartment felt like a harbinger of more grief, and I was suddenly scared of being alone. I texted my ex to tell him what happened and to ease the unbearable loneliness this death had unleashed in me. We talked. It made me want to save him some banana bread. When I developed a fever and cough a few days later, I worried for the firefighters who had been in my apartment. My ex lent me his thermometer and tried to reassure me the firefighters were suddenly encountering the virus in other places. Although my ex and I lived alone in separate apartments, our continued contact meant we were effectively isolating together, ushering in a new relationship gray zone. We talked every day. He offered to do my laundry, and one night, after I was feeling better, we ate tortellini and watched a movie. We weren't worried about infecting each other because we had been in contact all along. No longer romantic partners, we had become pandemic partners. Maybe I thought our relationship was on a pause, like a city, like the world, or maybe, like many couples, we were being kept together out of fear of being alone. My ex didn't like to be alone, so I knew isolation would be hard for him. He was always socializing, biking, traveling, planning. Our first months of dating rolled over me like tsunami. He gave me a toothbrush on our second date and a drawer in his bedroom the second month. Within 4 months, we had gone on 3 vacations and met each other's families, but I worried that we had moved too fast without having done the slower work of really getting to know each other. Sure enough, as we approached the 6 month mark, we started to see how we perhaps weren't so compatible after all. Um, Well, I wanted to analyze people and bare my soul. He wanted to talk about gadgets and problem solve. I didn't know if these were simply differences to adapt to. I'm an artist, he's an engineer. If they indicated a deeper problem, wouldn't we not have enough to talk about? Or if, as he wondered aloud towards the end of our relationship, he didn't want to bare his soul because he wasn't ready for something serious. Could he get ready? If we could just slow down, would we still have a chance? Now slowing down was government mandated. Maybe isolation with its solitude and time for reflection was bringing us together again. Now that I'd stopped pushing for intimacy, might he open up and offer it? Not really. And as my hopes for us shrank, my fear of being alone grew. I didn't know what to do. If I stopped seeing him, I wouldn't spend time with anybody for who knows how long. I was afraid of missing him since I already missed everyone. The sirens began to blare more frequently outside my window, and I urged myself to accept the strange terms of our relationship so that it wouldn't have to end. Until one night, 18 days past the onset of my symptoms, when he suggested I come over to bake Mexican wedding cookies, I felt encouraged by the title of the cookie he had picked, The Wedding Part, and I brought over renewed hope along the load with a load of dirty laundry. That night, we finally discussed our gray zone. What are the rules of a breakup in a pandemic? He said. No one knows. We have to go back to 1918 and ask. He did open up that night, and only to reiterate his lack of interest in engaging in the heart-to-hearts I craved. When he said, "I don't think we would make each other happy in the long term," I finally agreed. Isolation hadn't changed either of us. It had only clarified what we shared and what we lacked. Our mutual caretaking didn't change the fact that when I was with him, I felt lonely. I knew that reliving, reliving my disappointment in our relationship every time I saw him was too difficult, and I had to face being alone. I told him we should stop talking and rolling my suitcase of clean clothes home, crying the whole way. Yet, being alone has its pleasures. I'm listening to Jane Austen's audiobooks on my daily walks. Absorbed in her exciting social commentary, I feel engaged and free. It has taught me that not all solitude is accompanied by loneliness, and it reminds me of how my neighbor used to read his book contentedly. When the CDC recommended wearing cloth masks. I ordered an extra one to give to my ex when I finally returned his thermometer. While I'm no longer afraid of being alone, I also know that no one is self-sufficient, especially now that he and I will be there for each other for however long this lasts. Caretaking is the part we always got right. Sarah Rosen is a writer, actor, and filmmaker who lives in Brooklyn, the author of Kosher Porn. Kosher Porn. Oh gosh. Wow. It reminds me that one of my boyfriends broke up with me before the first Gulf War. That was like the worst timing ever. And it's true. These kind of situations only clarify what you don't have in common. And breakups are necessary. Wow. Anyway, peace, light, and love. And I'll finish with this piece because I don't think time. So we started with hunger and we moved on to this. This is the U.S. Virgin Islands. And we'll end with the sirens of the... No, this is the Israeli paper. Closure eased, more stores. Hair salons reopen. I have short hair and I'm growing it. So, and this is the protest in Rabin Square. With social distancing, 2,000 Israelis took to Rabin Square to protest the unity government deal that leaves Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in power as he prepares to go on trial for 3 corruption cases. The so-called Black Flag protests waved black flags and Israeli flags and held signs calling on corrupt politicians to go home. I wouldn't risk my health. Health Minister Yaakov Lichtman resigns! Yes! Amid virus crisis, seeks housing ministry where he can do more. So, good news. So, inside. Okay, so Iran's first successful military space launch should worry Israel. And I'll just read the back page. Gaza factories roar back to make protective wear, including for Israel. I suspect the mask I bought was also made in Gaza. And yeah, I just hope they have enough money from the masks. And they really should they should charge more because I think they don't make enough. So we have some. So anyway, it's a cool day here in weather has been very, very, and this is the caricature of the day. You can see like the new unity government. How changing your diet can help beat coronavirus. This is an article I would like to end with. So not only obesity, but diabetes, hypertension, and cardiovascular disease could be risk factors. So we want to increase our chances of surviving. The key question really comes from this. If, like many Americans and Israelis, you suffer from one of these conditions, what can you do? The answer may not be obvious, but 4 conditions have emerged together in a critical, often overlooked clue. Blah, 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 blah. Being overweight is almost always associated with metabolic syndrome. 25% of people we wouldn't consider overweight still have metabolic syndrome. Israelis are waking up to the fact we're consuming large amounts of carbohydrates. They lead to weight gain. So we need to a little bit less carbohydrates. We should be listening. Now more than ever, we should be listening to our bodies. We know sugar is not an essential nutrient, really, especially when combined with a sedentary lifestyle. Isolation can worsen symptoms of metabolic syndrome. On the whole, people with metabolic syndrome fare much worse than from coronavirus than those without. So, try to eat less. Not sugar, don't consume sugar so much. And Peace, light, and love. And I'll finish with this. 30 minutes of me. Thank you. Peace, light, and love.